Welcome to this Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to have you with us as we're going to dive deeply into a couple of things here on the program today, not the least of which would be the college football playoffs. So we'll be joined by the professor and also might have a little piece, a little taste of a segment that we call the big board, and it's appropriate holiday season, maybe some gifts that will be appropriated to various members of the sporting community. So you might want to stay tuned for that. I did want to start with some festivities and try every year to maybe come up with some kind of a Christmas poem, something appropriate for the holidays. And I don't know that this is very good. Probably have a big tune-out factor right after I get this thing started because I only came up with a couple of verses. And they start out maybe okay, and then it seems to deteriorate from there. It gets a little soft in the middle, and the conclusion, maybe not that great. But here we go. 'Twas the Friday before Christmas, and all throughout Caesars were a bunch of degenerates, mostly old geezers. They were betting all the favorites, hoping to cover a spread, knowing full well all chalk players wind up heavily in the red. Good luck with your wagers on the college football playoffs as we try to bury your bookie with some very exotic payoffs. I don't know. I was working on that. I don't think it was very good and probably should have just skipped it. Maybe if we had some editing, we might want to just put a line right through that entire segment. If you are betting games, and we're going to get into an analysis here with the professor in just a second of all of the college football playoff action that's on tap here. Our first game is today. Goes off tonight. Notre Dame hosting Indiana. Maybe the most interesting of the games on the board. Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to, and appropriate that we have the underdogs barking here, from the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they take place. With the largest selection of odds on everything, from the NBA, football, NHL, college basketball, the UFC, boxing. Head to BetOnline today, and don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on all of your first deposits. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, we welcome into the program the professor. And professor, we're off with a couple of bowl games. I know that you dabbled in already. And of course, all of the talk, all of the rhetoric, all of the conversation has been about the college football playoff. Should these guys have gotten in? Is Alabama getting screwed? Who's getting hosed? They got a 12-team field. They didn't eliminate the debates. If anything, they exacerbated them as to who belonged and who didn't. That probably is good, as my good friend Angelo Dundee used to say to me all the time. We need you guys to be talking about us. So if it's generating conversation, it's obviously generating some interest. And I think you're going to see a large, I would imagine there'll be some record-setting viewership. Would you think that that's the case for some of these games, the opening round of the college football playoffs?
It's interesting because I would have thought so, yes. But the only indicator I can point to is the relation between ticket prices and viewership, which is always pretty strong. But curiously, in this first round, Notre Dame and Indiana is the only game where there's like this huge demand for tickets. Now, bunch of factors involved there. Fans wanting to wait for their team to get deeper to go to a game, weather, all sorts of other things. But I think the average ticket price for Notre Dame and Indiana was $417, and all of the three games, curiously, was around $100, including Ohio State and Tennessee, which was kind of shocking to me.
Yes.
So we may see a scenario where just for this first round, maybe viewership's not quite as strong. I imagine as we go ahead, it'll get stronger and stronger.
All right. I don't know that the collegiate powerhouses and pundits would care as long as people are betting on the games. I mean, obviously, they want to sell some advertising, but I'm thinking that this is going to generate massive amounts of wagers all across the board. Now,
yes, and still not as much as Mike Tyson versus whichever Paul it was. I can't.
Yeah, Jake Paul. Who, I don't know. I heard he was fighting Jimmy Carter next. He's in negotiations.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
just a practically dead man. He's going to take on and probably make another $50 million. All right. Well, we have the whole thing tipping off tonight. or kicking off tonight as Notre Dame will be hosting Indiana. Indiana was a darling of degenerate bettors early in the season, especially our man Scotty M here on Bury Your Bookie. And then he got out of it when he realized that they were going to be in tough hands against Ohio State. They get clobbered in that ball game. That's their only loss on the board. What chance do they have against Notre Dame? What are your thoughts on this game?
I think they have a very good chance. Again, Notre Dame. I think people have gotten sort of wrapped into this narrative about them as the season has gone along, where they hung a bunch of points against bad defenses, and overall, I mean, look, look, it feels like the week after Army Navy, I'm going to come on here and rip Army and Navy again, which I'm not trying to do.
Yeah.
But unless you think Army and Navy were like legitimate top 10-ish football programs, those are Notre Dame's two best wins, or two most impressive wins of the year. We actually did have Navy right, by the way, even though we said we're not betting it. Take the points because you always take the points. Forget that many in that game. So again, you look at Notre Dame. The narrative in the early part of the season, Texas A&M and particularly Northern Illinois, was that the offense did not look good under Riley Leonard. It has improved. The running game has been strong. I don't know how strong I think Riley Leonard has been. And now we go into a weather game where the issue with Riley Leonard is he does not have that big an arm against an Indiana defense that is good against the run. I think it's going to be a very interesting game tonight. Now, Indiana is totally unpredictable. Again, it's a totally remade roster. They only played one game, although I would encourage people to look a little bit deeper into the box score with that Indiana-Ohio State game, where, yes, Ohio State did win 38-15, but you look at it overall, the numbers for the game were not that big of a blowout. Indiana fumbled two punts. Ohio State punched one in at the very end, but they scored like 2 seconds left to make that game look like it was much more lopsided than it actually was on the field. And let's be honest, Notre Dame does not have Ohio State's talent level. They got a nice team, but they are not loaded the way Ohio State is loaded, particularly at the skill positions. I think we could be looking at a very interesting ball game here. Because of that, I would lean towards Indiana in the points, particularly while you can still get 7. The difference beneath a touchdown gets a little bit more dicey, but as of the last moment I looked, you were still getting 7 with Indiana. I'd be inclined to take the points.
All right, taking the points with Indiana, and not necessarily an overwhelmingly strong play, but nonetheless, that's your thought. Take the points, and that would be mine also. Even though I've I had a small notion when they were 14-1 to take Notre Dame to win the national championship. They went off in the college football playoffs somewhere in the 850 plus 850 to 9-1. And I don't know. I mean, now when you look on the horizon there, the winner of this game gets into a much softer spot with Georgia waiting in the wings, SEC champions that they are. But in all likelihood, I don't know. Has this become official yet that Carson Beck is probably not going to play in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's been official since.
Yeah,
it's been official since I believe the day after the
arm injury. Yeah,
arm injury, the elbow injury. Yeah, he's out for the rest of the season.
Yeah. So, and you were commenting on a show we did earlier that
the backup
quarterback for Georgia, looks like Keanu Reeves in the replacements. Maybe not.
Keanu Reeves was good in the replacements.
Yeah. I mean,
let's not rip Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves,
as Johnny Utah, he was
frankly
also,
might be Ohio State's greatest quarterback, or it certainly is Ohio State's greatest fictional quarterback.
Yes.
I mean, not just the replacements, but we also had Point Break.
Point Break,
where it was Johnny Utah, former
those games
Ohio
on the beach with Swayze. I mean, they were pretty.
Who beat USC in the Rose Bowl? That's how Patrick Swayze remembered him. So, really, I have actually said this a number of times. I don't know why Ohio State doesn't have Keanu Reeves come out and play with the band, or when College Game Day goes to Ohio State. I don't know why Keanu Reeves isn't.
How is he not picking games? Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So,
I mean, really, if you look at the actual career of Kirk Herbstreit and the fictional career of Keanu Reeves, there's no question who is the better Ohio State quarterback.
You're right.
It's
should
Keanu
definitely
Reeves.
be accorded much more fame and credit for being among the best that they ever had. Although they'll never replace the legendary Craig Krenzel. Left an indelible impression upon
National champion Craig Krenzel.
Craig Krenzel beats the Miami Hurricanes that year because of this Terry Porter call at the end. What a scam. All right. The weather also going to be prohibitive, as you said. I did see Signetti, the Indiana coach, saying that his quarterback will have no problem with that because the kid's from Canada. He's some Canuck.
He is from Canada, yes.
Freezing his ass off in Winnipeg and was able to navigate his way through those kind of
Well,
conditions.
he also played in the MAC for 3 years, and we know once it gets like past October 4th, every MAC game is played in either torrential downpour or a driving blizzard. And we've all seen those Thursday night games from Toledo,
Yes.
where you can't even really tell if one team wears white. It's like wearing fucking camouflage in the jungle. Yeah.
It's like watching racing from Turfway Park.
Right, yeah.
The only guy left in the race book as they.
So yes, Rourke has played a number of games in the snow. And honestly has a bigger arm than Riley Leonard. Again, the issue with Leonard isn't necessarily the weather and the dealing with the cold. He just does not have a huge arm.
Yeah.
And we know rain and snowy conditions. Windy and snowy conditions bad for quarterbacks if you can't drive the ball through the wind.
All right, Penn State. You seem to be inclined to go with Penn State, laying what looks like 8 and a hook.
Yeah, I feel bad about this one.
SMU.
This is actually the weather game. Kickoff at last I looked, which was 20 or 30 minutes ago. Kickoff temperature supposed to be around 20 degrees with a decent chance of precipitation, which would mean snow. We saw SMU play in a weather game last year in the Fenway Bowl. They played basically the same offense under Rhett Lashley, and they absolutely fell apart in the weather last year. And if you watch them play, you can see why, because they are one of, if not the most vertical offense in the college football playoff. They're not looking to play sideline to sideline and spread you out. They're looking to spread you out, use their quarterback legs, and then hit you vertically. Obviously, in the weather, that becomes much more problematic, so they may need to reshape their game plan near entirely on offense. On defense, we saw against Clemson, they have problems with power backs in the run, and Penn State has not one but two really good ones. I'm not a big Drew Aller fan, particularly in big games, although he did look better against Oregon than he has ever looked in a big spot, in my opinion. But the one thing about the kid is he does have a gigantic arm, so the weather probably less impactful on him. As anybody who watches your shows know, I have done very well riding against Penn State in pretty much every big matchup for the last 2 years. But I think you got to go the other way here. I think the weather factor in this one will be gigantic. So not only did SMU get a road game, they got a road game in probably the single worst scenario weather-wise. And I think that would be too much for them. So far, just initial look, this would be my favorite pick. I know 8.5 is a pretty big number, particularly in a playoff situation, but this would be my best play would be Penn State minus the 8.5.
All right, the number is ballooned up like some loser's blood pressure getting beat on the buzzer in an NBA game in the Texas-Clemson game. 12 and a hook now, a rather large number to.
Yeah, the open was what, 10 or 10.5. Now up to 12.5. I don't really have an opinion on this one. Clemson's front seven is pretty good. It's not great. You look at Texas against Georgia and against Texas A&M, they really did struggle to generate offenses, although I will say, again, Clemson's got a pretty good front seven, but both Georgia and Texas A&M are a weight class above that. Forced me to play the game. Excuse me. I would probably be inclined to take the under because Texas, particularly for a Steve Sarkisian team, has kind of gone under in these big matchups the last couple of years. I think Texas will win the game, but 12.5 just too much.
That's a lot of points, yeah, for sure.
I would say Pasadena, but I know it's a playoff, so some people just aren't going to pass. If you're going to play, I would go the under the 51.5. And Texas defense has been pretty stout, so I don't think Clemson will have a whole lot of success against it.
I had to call my online therapist because I was considering it, and we discussed this, just to have any action on this, teasing all of the underdogs in some 7-point teaser. You're getting a lot of points with these teams.
I'm not disagreeing, but I think the SMU game
Yes,
is the
the new
one
game might do you
that
in.
could get
Be that
problematic
an
there for you
annihilation.
because
Yeah,
you get like
you were beginning 15
well,
and a hook.
15 and a hook. I could see that game getting ugly early for SMU and staying that way.
All
That
right.
would be the one that would worry me in the teaser situation.
And all it takes is one to ruin that four-teamer that you were counting on for your Christmas
Exactly.
gifts.
And what a 4-team 7 point, you're getting like plus 120, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's basically a 1-to-1 bet. I'd be a little hesitant. I'd be more inclined, honestly, to take the less points, take like a 5 point, leave leave SMU out, and just take a 3-team.
Okay.
And you still get roughly the 1-to-1.
All right. And the final game here, you do have an opinion on, and that is the Tennessee-Ohio State game. I know a lot of people are down on Ryan Day. The athletic director has already given his affirmation, usually a kiss of death, that Ryan Day will be back next year. If he's embarrassed in this ballgame by Tennessee, I don't know if that holds the same weight that it did when the athletic director was pouring that out to the press as if it was fact. But what do you see happening in this game?
I mean, again, my buddy PC called me yesterday, and they're doing some playoff pool. We get double points for underdogs.
All right.
And he was like, well, who among the underdogs can win this first round game? I said, Indiana can win. Tennessee can win. Who will win of the two? I think Tennessee's probably the slightly more likely to actually win the game of the two. And this game will really come down to Ryan Day. If Ryan Day, in the weather in Ohio, opens the offense up and plays to where his personnel is, I think Ohio State will win the game. But if Ryan Day does what he did against Indiana, what he did against Michigan, what he did against Notre Dame last year, and get real conservative and want to play Woody Hayes football against teams whose strengths are better than that Ohio State offensive line, I think it'll be a very tight game, and I would not be surprised at all to see Tennessee win. I wouldn't be even shocked to see Tennessee win by like 7 or 10 in that scenario,
Wow.
just because their defensive line is a lot better than the Ohio State offensive line. So we'll see what Ryan Day and Chip Kelly come up with. But if it's a game plan that looks like that Michigan game plan, where we're going to do 3 yards in a cloud of snow, it's probably not going to work out very well for them because the strength of that Tennessee team is the defensive line. They're right up there with Georgia for being as good as or better than anybody in the country. So yes, particularly at 7.5, which I'm showing you're still getting that extra hook. I would be inclined to take the Vols and the points because I think Day will default to this Midwestern. You got to play like it's still 1974
Macho
nonsense
Man.
that he does over and over again in big games.
Yeah, it's Ryan Day, Sugar Ray Leonard, Montreal, Roberto Duran. I think I'll stand inside and slug it out with this guy.
Styles make fights, right?
Dance rings around if I just went with my usual.
Well, look, the classic, like the dudes who wanted to slug it out with Thomas Hearns. Like,
yeah. Never worked out. Yes.
Not like Tommy wasn't a great fighter, but if you got in and brawled with him, unless you're Marvin Hagler, it probably wasn't going to work out for you.
No, it usually was pretty devastating. Just ask Pepino Cuevas, who was practically in the fourth row by the second round, middle of the second round. All right, I know, and I'm hoping we can reprise this with the visuals because you did a nice job with this last week, and it's one of my favorite segments that I do with anybody or ever have done. And that is your big board of.
Let's see if we can figure out how to do this.
Yeah, if we have the visuals, it'll make a big difference because you had a couple of excellent Christmas gifts that you wanted to give out, and I was going to zero in on a couple of them here. That was number 5.
Here's number 5, which is give Steve Cohen some GameStop stock if you have any. Why? Because really he's trying to ruin Major League Baseball.
Yes.
Instead of being the bad guy in the whole GameStop trade. Number 4 for SEC
this
fans.
Is among my favorites, and I believe it has as much merit as any Christmas gift, as much relevance that we will find, and for the sports fan anyway.
The all SEC playoffs, because that's the only way these people are ever going to be happy. They're so miserable with the results, and it doesn't really matter how many SEC teams get in.
Yeah.
They're going to want at least one more, as we said on the other show. If you gave them 11 of the 12 spots and it was just the Big Ten champ versus the SEC, SEC fans this year would be like, well, I don't know if Oregon really belongs in over Kentucky. Kentucky did beat Ole Miss at home. That's better than everything Oregon has done, going unbeaten this year. So let's have the all SEC. Let's just do it. Just give them what they want, and the rest of the country can play for the other national title. It'll be like the Civil War all over again. North and South and East and West. It'll all be just the South, just playing each other, which is, let's be honest, it's what SEC fans want. So let's give it to them.
Like boxing and pro wrestling, or you just start a new organization.
There you go.
And give out a championship. And after a short period of time, I guess the Live Tour is trying to get into the same position.
There you go. It's the same thing with golf, right? We don't want to play. We want to play 3 rounds
in there, and eventually they recognize, oh yeah, well he's the so and so champion.
And really, they can get the money there too, because like, what's a bit more natural combination than Saudi Arabia and the SEC?
It'll be played in the desert in the dead of winter here in the United States. They'll ship this thing there in Riyadh. All right, that was number 4 on the list, and it was a good one. And I was particularly enthralled by the idea that you would have anything that represented even the slightest shred of kindness, empathy, sympathy for one of your favorite targets. So whenever you're talking sports,
and that'll be number 3 for Bill Belichick. A sense of comfort with the fact that you are no longer a young man.
Yes.
That, like, you shouldn't be chasing around 20-year-olds. And you shouldn't be having to recruit, 3-star quarterbacks out of Mississippi and dealing with, Aunt Jenny and Uncle Buck, who want their boy to go to a good educational institution, get himself a college degree. Like, let's be honest. And you went to North Carolina, a school with, number 1, no history of football success whatsoever. And number 2, a history of chasing around old, over-the-hill coaches who are on their last legs. Yes. I mean, honestly, in this scenario, Mac Brown is like the dog who got like 18 years old, so they took him out behind the barn and shot it. And replaced it with an even older dog in Bill Belichick. Like, you can't tell me he's signing on for this. He's doing this because nobody in the NFL wants him. So why don't you just move on into the sunset and maybe date somebody a little bit more age appropriate on top of it? Because I know, like, there are people in there like, it's so cool, like 25-year-old women still want him. Yeah, they want him the way all those models wanted Hefner back in the day. You don't think that's actually fun for her. She's just putting in the work
you
to try to end up in the West.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example. I mean, this is almost there in terms of age differential, maybe even more so. I keep picturing over the holidays, and I don't know if Belichick is inclined to do this, but he'd be sitting at the table with this 24-year-old babe. He's 72, and her parents are there, and they're in their early to mid 50s. And you're asking yourself, how uncomfortable, how awkward would that conversation be?
It's exactly so awkward and so uncomfortable that he'd rather deal with 19-year-old wide receivers in the transfer portal than go to her house for Christmas.
I mean, you would have to think that Belichick is inclined to try and convince her to make other arrangements than to see her family. So that becomes part of the divide also, if you're the parents. Well, we haven't heard from them yet as to what their opinion is of this relationship. That you would have to say is a bit of a stretch. I mean, it certainly exceeds our standards of the Mendoza.
Again, it's as much of a stretch as taking the job at North Carolina. Not only did you go down to college football because even the Atlanta freaking Falcons didn't want you. You couldn't find a good college to take. You couldn't get the Alabama job, even though everybody wants to run Kalen DeBoer out of town. You couldn't get the Oklahoma job, even though everybody hates Brent Venables at this point.
And
you had to take the University of North Carolina job. You had to take the job at a basketball school, and not the basketball job. You got the football job at a basketball school.
Yeah, if you could coach football, you could coach anything. All right, and that was Bill Belichick. Very, very unusual for you to express any kind of, as I said, warmth towards one Bill Belichick. Now,
well, this would be like if Jim Boeheim took a WNBA job, or a college women's basketball job.
All right, and you had Mike Vrabel. You were going to.
He's number 2.
Fans of Mike Vrabel, he was number 2, and then I wanted to jump.
Every old white guy who wants a new football coach for their NFL team, it's Mike Vrabel. Because they all want Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel's going to have to coach like 6 teams just to keep semi-retired old white NFL fans happy next. You got to coach in Cleveland and Chicago and Miami and like 4 other jobs. We're going to be playing NFL games on Wednesday nights just so Mike Vrabel can keep all his jobs to make
When
NFL
did he
teams
become
happy.
Vince Lombardi? I mean, he's been out of
Right?
here for a while. Obviously, there have been a zillion jobs that have opened up, both pro and college, and
And
Vrabel has
everybody wants Mike
every bit of
Vrabel.
it. Yes, and now all of
Oh
a sudden,
yeah,
it's in
and
hot.
he's going to coach Ohio State if they lose to Tennessee on the weekend too. So
Entirely possible. All right, so that was at number 2, but number 1 I think was an essential to get in on the program here on Bury Your Bookie because it really speaks volumes about a lot of different things.
it does, and this man is somebody who has everything, so he's very difficult to buy for. But there is one thing he has been very clear that he wants, and he even brought it up again this week, and that is our biggest Christmas gift. It's going to be the toughest one on the list to find,
Yeah.
but maybe we can pull it off if all the viewers chip in and tell us where we would find it, and that is, let's get Aaron Rodgers polio. Polio for Christmas for Aaron Rodgers. He's been very clear. The number one thing he wants is some disease that we wiped out with a vaccine
Yes.
decades and decades ago. He wants to bring them all back. So if you have some smallpox, that might work as a stocking stuffer. But the big one, because we know the one thing Aaron Rodgers wants is for his weird pseudo daddy, RFK Jr., to pay more attention to him.
Yes.
In a way his own real father will not talk to him.
Right.
So let's get Aaron Rodgers polio, because I feel like that's what he's waiting for under the tree more than anything else.
Very appropriate, yeah. And the RFK thing. I mean, Jonas Salk is rolling over in his grave watching the activities that are going on in the United States right now. All right, Professor, excellent job on that. And these are just some ideas. And people always come up with this kind of stuff on talk shows and say, hey, well, let's get a Christmas gift for Chris Greer. Let's get him an offensive line. But a very unique approach to this particular idea. And I think with some very appropriate gifts to be passed along. Professor, thanks, as always, for joining us here on the show.
You have a great one, Dave.
All right, the professor, ladies and gentlemen, and what we call the big board on one of our other programs that we do that you can find on South Florida Live, known as the Defo Show, appropriately enough. Hey, if you were an NBA bettor last night, I want to leave you guys with this, and we thank the professor for joining us here on the program. NBA bettor last night, if you were a chalk player, we mentioned the chalk players in that pathetic rendering of who was that? Was that Gershwin that wrote that thing? Robert Frost? I don't know. It was one of those cats. The night before Christmas, and probably none of the above, right? But if you were betting the NBA last night and you were a chalk player, you literally needed to zip up a body bag around your carcass as you were being carried out of the casino sports book. Timberwolves favored by 2.5 over the Knicks. Knicks 133, Timberwolves 107. This I bring in even though the favorite prevailed in this game, but because the score was so outrageous and Steph Curry not landing or scoring a single field goal in a game. Memphis was favored by 4 in this one. So the chalk players were in delight, but worthy of mention because the final was 144-93, Memphis over Golden State. Holy 3-point line. My God, what was going on there? John Morant going crazy. Steph Curry, I think, was 0 for 7 from the field. That might have been the second time since he was in Pee Wee basketball that he didn't score a field goal in a game. But these favorites got clobbered and all lost outright. Boston minus 14.5. The Bulls beat them by 9. The Mavericks were favored by 6.5 over the LA Clippers. Clippers by 23. And then passing and bombing fluid once again, you chalk players out there. The Sacramento Kings, 5-point favorites over the Lakers. This one wasn't too bad. Yeah, you might be able to recover from this, but the Lakers win that one by 13. So chalk was very much detrimental to anybody's mental, physical, and financial well-being. If you were betting several of these NBA games last night, it was blowout city, my friends. All right, we will be with you 3 of the 5 days next week, and hoping everybody is getting set for just a very festive holiday season. You got Christmas and Hanukkah coming up, which we'll all be celebrating. I celebrate them both, and so it makes it an especially good time. Hopefully, we'll come up with a bunch of winners for you. We had the professor's plays on the college football playoff games, and once again, he has sort of a heavy lean towards Indiana. I don't know that it's one of his overwhelming plays, but likes getting the points with Indiana against Notre Dame. That's tonight. Then tomorrow, very uncharacteristically, especially with James Franklin's record in big games, he has Penn State covering 8.5 against SMU, who he feels is going to be badly compromised by the weather with their big play attack and not going to be able to just start slinging the ball down the field. Going to be very prohibitive, supposedly. And as we say, if you could book the weatherman's action, you'd be a rich man today. But it appears that this is going to be the case, that the weather's going to be particularly nasty in State College, PA. Texas, Clemson, not a strong opinion on. He's thinking Texas prevails. Once again, Dabo needing divine intervention to make something happen there. But was inclined to bet the under if he was just going to take a little stab on the game. And then he does like Tennessee as the team, the best chance to pull off an upset, straight up win. And he likes Tennessee against Ryan Day and his penchant to go conservative when he's in tough spots and find ways to blow other games, all these kind of games that are otherwise very winnable. So that was the professor. Tennessee getting the 7.5 with Ohio State and possibly a little sniff on the money line. All right. We hope you guys are on the money all weekend long. Thanks so much for joining us here. I'm Jeff DeForrest for the people at Greenlight Ventures, nofilter.net. And, of course, Bet Online. We're wishing you the best of luck over the weekend, and we'll see you Monday on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.